I ask you to reflect on the following concluding remarks relating
I would like to think it's the same schedule as what Christo used, but I can't.
Yes. I'm sure you are not aware that he testified about those calculations and the amount that he said he supported and gave the chairperson some details. Chair, I believe that you do have Mr. Naga's statement. It's you too.
Yes, I do, yes.
I would ask you to go to SN11B, which is that A3-pager set of documents Mr. Mukwena gave to you.
And just repeat the last part, which is
SN11 capital B.
Yes, Is that the spreadsheet?
Is the spreadsheet, but I'll just read an amount.
I think my registrar put it somewhere. Is it not? Where is that spreadsheet? Did you put it in? Okay, I've got it.
Thank you, Chair. If you could go to SNB 11. You don't have it, Mr. Opperman, but I'm just going to read out a figure to you and ask you to reflect on some concluding remarks that I'd like to make on this topic. Chair would recall that what he did in relation to that figure, he talked about two sets of dates. The first you will see is the settlement agreement / optimum letter / CHD response letter.
Yes.
That is the history of the calculation which he tracked and traced from the letter of demand sent by CDH on behalf of ESCOM. And then he reflected on a date 2017-0303, and he calls it updated penalty master.
Yes.
And then he said the amount that he was willing and prepared to support is 1.166 billion rand, which is right at the bottom under the column updated penalty master.
Yes, I remember the figure. I can't see it now, but I think you may proceed. I'll still find it.
And he said he was surprised that ESCOM was willing to settle at 255 million rand in the light of this figure.
Yes.
And that this is the amount which ESCOM was willing to give up, in his own words, I think.
Yes.
If I'm not quoting, certainly paraphrasing his evidence. And for your purposes, Mr. Opperman, your colleague, Mr. Naga, I think you know him, was prepared to support a penalty amount of 1.166 billion. The concluding remark that I'd like you to reflect on and comment about is this. Did you know that Mr. Naga, as at 2017 March, had done this calculation? And did he share it with you?
No, he did not.
So you're not aware of this?
No, I'm not.
Okay. The next concluding remark that I'd like you to reflect on is based on your own interpretation of the agreement. You arrived at an amount of 720 odd rand. Did you convey that amount to anyone?
Million.
20 million rand, sorry. My apologies. ESCOM will kill me. Did you convey that amount of 720 million odd rand to anyone in ESCOM?
No.
Not. So what happened? You kept it to your own...
I need to recall in January 2015, I wrote a letter to the negotiation team
Yes.
giving a response on the discussion between myself and Mr. Needham from Glencore around the penalty calculations.
Yes.
I can't recall if I actually mentioned the amount in that letter.
Is that letter in your bundle?
I don't think I referenced it now.
Okay. If you were to obtain a copy of it in due course, could you make it available to us?
I'll gladly do that.
Yes. So what was the significance of that letter?
As part of the negotiation team, with the negotiations around the fourth addendum or cooperation agreement, I was tasked to engage with Mr. Needham to get alignment and the same understanding on the penalty calculations on this coal supply agreement.
Yes.
And that memorandum was intended to just provide feedback to the negotiation team. It did not conclude that there was alignment or agreement on the penalty calculation mechanism. It merely provided feedback and an update on the discussion that I had with Mr. Needham.
Yes. So do I then take it that your members, that is the ESCOM side of the negotiation team, would have been aware of that letter?
Yes, sir.
So they would have been aware of the position that you took in relation to the calculation of the penalties?
As I say, I can't recall if I put it into that document. I will have to check.
Yes. And finally, on this issue, you have explained to the chair how you arrived at that amount. And Chair, that is the document or the spreadsheet at 253.
Are we back
To
the other file?
Yes, to U8.
Okay, 253 you said.
253.
Okay. Yes, I've got it.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to draw some conclusions on this, if you don't mind, Mr. Opperman. This is your spreadsheet, correct?
That's correct.
When did you prepare it?
I can't say, but it must have been around that period, February 2015, up until when this document was updated.
All right. And what did you do with this spreadsheet after you had prepared it?
I can't recall that I did anything with it. It was just a calculation that I did.
Yeah,
I
but-
might have discussed it with Mr. Kruger. I can't.
No. The point is you were not doing anything other than fulfilling your official functions and duties.
Yes.
Yes. And so it would have been a document that, on the face of it, in your view, a reflection of the outcome of your functions and duties
Okay.
during the negotiations period. I take it that you did not prepare it and simply put it in your own file. You must have done something to execute those functions and duties.
I will have to go and check if I shared it with somebody. I can't recall.
As you say yes and so on or no, Mr. Opperman, just make sure that the mic can catch your words so that it's recorded.
100%.
Okay.
All right. Again, I'd like you to reflect on that issue and come back to us, even if it's by way of a formal affidavit. I'm interested in finding out what did you do with the spreadsheet after you had prepared it around 2015. Chair, I have dealt with the question of penalties, and subject to your direction, I'll move on to the next topic.
No, that's fine.
And that begins, Mr. Opperman, from page 9, paragraph 48.
I just wanted to say I'm still not sure about the issue that we discussed earlier about where Mr. Opperman stands with regard to the 2.1 billion rand, the 700 and something million, but I guess we have spent more than enough time on it. I will
Yes,
read the transcript and see
Yes.
what the position is. Yeah.
Chair, we are clear about that
Yeah.
evidence. In other words,
Yes.
it matters not whether he is correct.
Yes. Yes.
It matters not whether his
Yeah.
calculations were based on a proper interpretation of the agreement.
Yes. Yes.
The point that we sought to make through him is that he was not consulted on a matter that clearly falls within his portfolio.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, of course, I guess the other point you may have been seeking to make is also that if he had been consulted and assuming that the relevant authorities sought to give due weight to his view on the amount, maybe it's unlikely that they would have settled at the low amount on which they settled.
Yes, Chair.
So they might not have insisted on 2.1 billion, but at least maybe they would have insisted on his figure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chair, the horns of dilemma, as you understand, for those who will be called to explain to you, is
Yes.
this. That if they go for 2.1 billion in
Yes.
July, August 2015, without even consulting with Mr. Opperman, then it means that they did not do their job properly. The result of that failure of duty is that you have placed Optimum into business rescue with the drastic consequences that carried. On that approach, what happened to the arbitration for that 2.1 billion when Tegeta takes over? Because once Tegeta takes over, we hear nothing about 2.1 billion and the
Yes.
arbitration on that score.
Yes. Yes.
Because the only explanation they can give is that the business rescue suspended the arbitration. But we know that the business rescue ended in September 2016. The arbitration for 2.1 billion would have sat there, still continued. But instead of the arbitration on 2.1 billion, what happens is the reduction of the penalties. And those are the inexplicable set of circumstances which
Yes.
we'd like people to explain.
Yes.
It is for that reason we called Mr. Opperman.
Yeah.
We called him to interrogate that issue. We have his version.
Yes. No, that's fine. That's fine.
And that's where, Chair, we would simply suggest that there is something more than a mere miscalculation.
Yes.
There's something more than a mere
Yes.
advancement of a claim which is not well-founded.
Yes. Okay.
Mr. Opperman, I'm going to ask you to go to page 9 and paragraph 48 of your statement. You do confirm that there was commencement of business rescue proceedings, and you know that Mr. Pierce Marsden and his colleague were appointed as joint business rescue practitioners.
Correct.
Did you ever deal with them in their capacity as business rescue practitioners?
I have dealt with them once or twice, but not on an ongoing basis. And I once attended I think it was a creditors meeting that they chaired.
Yes.
And I think there was a letter that I sent to them that was addressed to them.
Yes.
So, like that.
Are you aware that one of the issues they had to confront as business rescue practitioners is the fact that Eskom withheld payment of 2 invoices in June and August 2016? I mean, that's a matter that falls within your portfolio, correct?
Correct, yes.
The processing and payment of invoices.
Correct.
Are you aware of that fact?
I can recall it, yes.
Yes. Do you know why Eskom withheld that payment, those two payments?
At that moment in time, there was a consultation with Mr. Nagar, and the view was that that monies be withheld to compensate for the accrued penalties up to that moment in time, because Eskom's view was that if Optimum goes in business rescue, we will not get any monies.
So again, Eskom was insisting on payment of penalties at that point in time?
Correct.
Yes. Are you also aware that the business rescue practitioners suspended supply of coal to Hendrina
Yes, that happened in August, yes.
in August 2015?
Correct.
Yes. Did you deal with the business rescue practitioners around the suspension of coal?
I can't recall exactly. There must have been some engagements. I know that the supply was suspended around the 3rd of August for about 3-4 days.
Yes.
And then it was again suspended, I think, around the 21st of August, and that continued to the 3rd of September when they recommence with
Yes.
deliveries.
All I want to understand is that this is the matter that also fell within your portfolio. Did you ever deal with them on that issue?
I can't recall how we dealt with it at that moment in time. It might have been communication through our legal team with them. Surely there was an engagement on my side to have an engagement with Optimum. I can't recall exactly if I communicated directly with them or if it was through our internal legal team.
All right. You conclude that topic around the business rescue status of OCM by referring to an event which I cannot locate in the evolution of the relationship between Optimum Coal Mine in Business Rescue and Eskom. I direct your attention to paragraph 50 on page 10 of your statement. You say there, on 17 September 2015, OCM sent a settlement proposal to Eskom on all outstanding matters. I do not have a record of the proposal. And on 19 September 2015, CDH issued a notice to OCM that relaxed the sizing specification and suspended penalties on qualities. I do not have a record of the notice issued by CDH. This agreement was backdated to commence 4 September 2015 and was only for 60 days. Do you see that?
Yes.
What was the effect of this arrangement? Because my understanding is that Eskom had always insisted on compliance with coal quality sizing specifications. You've just also indicated that it insisted on withholding payment because of those coal quality specification deficiencies.
Correct.
Why in September 2015 there is a notice from the attorneys of Eskom to suspend sizing specifications and penalties?
I can only think that the discussion was around the reinstatement of the supply. It coincides with the 4th of September when the supply reconvened. And that Optimum agreed at that moment in time to say we will reconvene with the coal supply, but then you need to suspend these penalties. As this proposal or this letter came from Cliff Decker and Hofmeyer, which were our legal advisors, there was obviously consultation between them and the business rescue practitioners, and they were talking, and there was an agreement around this. I think at that moment in time, the most critical thing for us was to get the coal supply to Optimum, to Hendrina Power Station reinstated.
Yes. I suppose you were not consulted on this proposal.
I can't recall it now.
No, but if you were, you would have recalled.
For sure.
And if you're consulted, you would have given us copies of these letters.
For sure.
So the bottom line is you were not consulted at all?
Correct.
Yes. You move to the next topic, and I'll be fairly quick there because we now understand the process for certification of coal compliance when it is delivered on the one hand through a conveyor belt, or when it's delivered on the other hand through rail. You explain that process from paragraph 51 on page 10. And you conclude that insofar as coal from Hendrina is concerned, it was delivered by a conveyor belt, and the process for coal certification for compliance will be through sample testing, correct?
Yeah, the sample was collected through a sampler, yes.
Yes. There's nothing that turns on your explanation. From paragraph 56, you deal with that issue, and there's nothing that arises for purposes of asking you further questions on it, unless you want to raise anything. In that regard, I would ask you to go to page 12, paragraph 59. In paragraph 59, you say, in hindsight, it became clear that soon after 2012 refurbishment of the sampling plant, the recorded sizing parameters of the coal supplied via conveyor did not meet the contract specification. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
When did you pick up for the first time that, as a matter of hindsight, the coal delivered did not comply with sizing specifications?
It became evident at the time on 1st October when the crusher was switched off in the sampling plant that the issue all the time was actually related to the upgrade and the work that was done on the sampler around 2012 that introduced this increased fines that was reported.
I just need a time that I can work it. Is that the time you refer in paragraph 62?
Yes, 61 and 62, correct.
61 and 62. So it's around October?
Correct.
Yes. My recollection of your evidence on this score earlier on, when we anticipated these two paragraphs, was that the problem was not resolved fully. You said that there was some significant improvement, correct?
Correct.
And that the problems of sizing still remained?
Correct.
Yes. So that the coal quality which was delivered after this period still had some problem of some sort related to sizing, correct?
That's correct.
Yes. I'm asking you this question because we know that after the new owner took over, it continued to deliver coal to Hendrina from the same mine, correct?
That's correct.
Yes. And they would, all things being equal, still be coal quality problems related to sizing.
Correct.
What I want to understand is, after the new owner took over, did you guys look at the question of penalties coming from the same coal mine? I'm talking about the period April. In fact, let me become more precise. I'm talking about the period September 2016 going forward.
Yes, we did.
And did you impose those penalties?
Yes, we did.
Right. I'd like you to take me to your documentation where that happened. I am distinguishing between two things. Historic penalties of 2.1 billion and future penalties that began to apply from September 2016. Your evidence is that you did impose penalties.
Correct.
Okay. Chair, I'll explore that issue when we come to September 2016.
That's fine.
Because I I can't pick it up.
Okay.
I confess that
Yeah.
I may have been drowned in documentation
Yeah.
and forgot the bigger picture.
No, that's fine.
Yes. Mr. Opperman, I have now concluded anything before the question of session, which is a new topic, you deal with from page 12, paragraph 63. Do you see that?
Yes.
In that paragraph, you talk about an internal memo dated 29 October 2015. Chair, you'll find that memo on page 258. And I'd like to take you there if you don't mind, Mr.
258.
Yes.
Okay.
Come on, is it me again?
Is that the correct page you gave me?
I think I made a mistake.
Is it
It's
GJ019?
GJ19. No, I'm sorry, it's my mistake. It's GJ019 is 254.
Okay. Yes.
Mr. Opperman, you included this memo in your documentation. Do you see that?
Yes, I did.
And it seems to me that this is a request for approval by the Group Executive for Generation for the supply of coal from Optimum Mine for a specific period. Do you see that?
Yes.
If you look at paragraph 2 on page 255. Can I ask you to give us some background why in October 2015 approval is required from Mr. Koko about a short-term supply for coal from Optimum Mine? I would have thought that by that time there always existed a CSA between ESCOM and Optimum to supply coal.
Mr. Chair, at this moment in time, I can take you to page 254.
Yes.
The table under point number C. What is of relevance is that this table changes the sizing parameters under the existing CSA for this period. So one can see that the size fraction for the 0.81, where the previous contract specification was 15%, it is now increased to 20%.
Where are you reading from? I'm sorry, I missed you.
It's page 256.
256.
In that table,
Yes.
under quality, if you go right to the bottom,
Yes.
it refers to the size specification on the smaller size, 0.81 millimeter.
Yes.
And it says no more than 20% of the coal supply will be smaller than the 0.81 millimeter.
Yes.
The existing contract specification at this moment in time, that was 15%. So in essence, this memo is requesting a change in the quality parameters on the existing CSA for this period.
I see.
So it was, was it making things easier for, in terms of quality and to the detriment of ESCOM?
I think it was dealing, Chair, with the size fraction that was consistently high and above the 15% and attracting sizing penalties on an
Penalties,
ongoing basis.
Yes.
So at this moment in time, there must have been some engagement to say if we can change it to 20%, that is something that the mine can achieve. Because
Yeah,
that's the
so-
only thing that I can see that was changed.
So previously it was 15%.
1.5, correct, yes.
15. So in which case, under that regime, the penalties would start accumulating earlier,
Correct.
quicker. But
Correct.
now, no penalties would accumulate until 20% at least has been exceeded.
That's correct.
Yeah.
You know, at this point, what is surprising about this, and don't misunderstand me or the tone of my question, I'm not blaming you, but what is surprising about this request for approval at that point in time is that Glencore had been requesting this shift and change of the penalty level from 15 to even 20, correct?
Correct.
And that was rejected.
Correct.
Having rejected that historic request, you're now going to, ESCOM is seeking an approval to change that very same position it had rejected previously, correct?
That is correct.
Why a sudden change of heart?
Why the inconsistency?
Pardon me, Chair?
No, I'm saying Mr. Malega is asking why the inconsistency, why are Glencore and Tegeta treated differently by ESCOM in regard to this issue?
I cannot answer that question, Chair. The requester of this was Ms. Ayanda Nteta, and I think that is the person to answer it.
All right. And this request was supported by a number of people, and their names appear on page 257. Do you see that?
That's correct.
What happened to this request? Was it approved?
By the look of the signatures, it was approved.
Yes.
Yes.
The final approver was Mr. Koko, according to the last page of the memo. Ms. Nteta was the requester, and Neo Cholanko was a supporter, Vusim Mboweni was a supporter, Mr. Machela Koko was the approver. Okay.
Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So we know that they've approved it, and it's for a short period of time. And we know it was during the time when this entity was still under business rescue, correct?
That's correct.
Yes. I'm going back to your statement. In paragraph 63, you refer to annexure GJ20. Chair, it's a report by a consultancy that ESCOM engaged. I've read it. And
Yes.
maybe Mr. Opperman will help us about the importance of this.
Yeah.
Because it simply talks about the market analysis of coal all over the world and here, and what could be the possible reason why Glencore sought a renegotiation. But I'm not too sure if it adds anything to the debate. Mr. Opperman, how do you want us to consider this document?
Mr. Chair, I cannot recall requesting this document, and I thought that it was of relevance to include it since this came at the end of this sizing adjustment. A similar document was requested in December 2013. A similar exercise was undertaken by a different company, and in reality, it basically made the same conclusion. We just talked to the impact of the markets and the different movements around it.
Yeah. In terms of cash to cost, if this document is any relevant at all, you will find the analysis done by the consultants on page 280. About the different mines owned by Glencore supplying coal to ESCOM, and what was the cash to cost implication of the supply to ESCOM. The bottom line is that Optimum was not the most expensive, correct?
Correct.
The most expensive was Spring Lake. Do you see that?
Yes.
Chair, I can't take it further. I mean, I will leave it unless you...
No, that's fine.
Yes. I would like to take you back to your statement and ask you to go to paragraph 64 on page 13. You refer to annexure GJ21, and Chair, you will find it at page 285.
285.
Yes, but the real document begins at 286. I'd ask you to go there, Chair.
Okay. Yes.
Mr. Opperman, you'll see that that's the change of ownership.
That is correct.
Yes. And it takes place through a cession of shares in the operating company that owns the mine, correct?
That's correct.
Yes. I want to focus on paragraph 1.2 on page 286. Paragraph 1.2 of the approval given by the BTC consenting to the change of ownership provides that there will be a release of the guarantee given by OCH to Eskom. You would know, as the manager of the various power stations, especially in relation to Hendrina, that a guarantee of performance given by a supplier is a useful collateral for Eskom, correct?
That's correct.
If you release the supplier from that guarantee, then there's a risk posed to Eskom about the performance by the supplier of his contractual obligations, correct?
That's correct.
So to make sure that the change of ownership does not impact adversely on Eskom, you would insist that the new owner provide a guarantee, correct?
That's correct.
So what paragraph 3 records, and Cham at page 286,
Yes.
is that the condition for that session is that Tegeta had to provide a guarantee of its own. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes. The question is, well, before I put the question, that change of ownership was contractually recorded as between Eskom and Tegeta by means of an amendment to the existing CSA. And remember, when the CSA was in operation, the last of the amendments we have looked at was the third addendum.
That's correct.
The addendum which constituted the amendment to reflect the change of ownership is now called the fourth addendum, correct?
That's correct.
To be distinguished from the draft fourth addendum which the board had rejected. And that fourth addendum, you'll find it, Chair, from page 288.
Yes.
And for the purposes of the question that I had intimated but I had not yet put to you, can I ask you to go to page 291? You'll see paragraph 2.1.5.2. It says Eskom being issued with a guarantee by Tegeta on the same terms as the Eskom guarantee, to ESCOM's satisfaction. Do you see that?
Yes.
So that it is part and parcel of this fourth addendum that ESCOM had to be given a guarantee by Tegeta to ESCOM's satisfaction, correct?
Correct.
Yes. The board had required that the addendum be given. The fourth addendum we have looked at provide for the contractual obligation to provide for the guarantee. The question is, was that guarantee given by Tegeta?
According to my understanding, no, it has not been given. Something that I also want to mention is that I only became aware of this fourth addendum on the 8th of June 2017.
2000 in June 20?
17.
Okay.
I only saw the addendum for the first time on the 24th of July 2017. So on the 8th of June 2017, I became aware that there is a fourth addendum. It was in the process where we started with the drafting of what was now the fifth addendum. And in that draft document, we called it the fourth addendum, and then we were told, but there is already a fourth addendum. You can't draft the fourth addendum. So that happened around the 8th of June 2017. And as I say, the first time that I saw this document was on the 24th of July 2017.
Yes. We will come back to the significance of that evidence. And you do confirm, Chair, if you can go to page 13, paragraph 67. You do confirm in paragraph 67 that the first time the fourth addendum was made known to you was on the 8th of June 2017, correct?
Correct.
Yes. There are several issues that I'd like to explore with you. You are aware that the fourth addendum was signed by the parties 14 months earlier than the date when you yourself became aware of it, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Opperman, I mean, the questions relating to the fourth addendum, the amendment of the CSA by way of a fourth addendum, are matters that fall within your portfolio.
That's correct.
Yes. From your evidence, it seems as if people were doing something about your portfolio without even telling you.
That is correct.
Why would that be the case? I mean, can you think of any reason why you being a person in charge of whether the fourth addendum should, whether the CSA should be amended, and if so, whether it should be on the terms formulated by the addendum? What is any plausible reason that people in ESCOM would avoid and not talk to you on that issue?
I can only speculate, Mr. Mayor.
Please do.
So Mr. Oberman, the way he looks at me is as if he is saying, well, come to my rescue. Why must I speculate? so I think, Mr. Malega, don't force him to speculate.
Chair,
Yeah.
in fairness, I thought I should put that question, but we have our own reasons. And we
no.
don't want to be accused of
Yeah.
unfair speculation when the witness who could have helped us has come and gone. But
No, I think let him not speculate.
Okay. Let us not speculate, but it is surprising, is it not? That
Very surprising.
you are ignored on a matter falling within your portfolio. Okay.
Very much.
Yes. And you say you became aware of the fourth addendum a year and 2 months later, but you now confirm that the guarantee contemplated in the fourth addendum was not given.
No.
Yes. Even by the time when Optimum went into a second business rescue, that guarantee had not been given.
Correct.
as you speak today, that guarantee is not in place.
That's correct.
Yes, that's when I say articulate your answer so the microphone can capture it and record your answer, Mr. Opperman. I know it's been a long day, but when you nod, the answer is not recorded.
You are correct, Mr. Maleka.
Thank you. So Eskom has been on risk the day Glencore divested ownership of this mine, and the day Tegeta took over this mine.
That is correct, yes.
I won't ask you to speculate why.
Thank you.
Well, you were kept in the dark about the fourth addendum for a long time. When you say this guarantee was never provided to Eskom, what are the chances that you might not know the true position? It might be there, but you have been kept in the dark about it as well, also.
Mr. Chair, that is possible.
Sorry?
Mr. Chair, that is possible.
But in terms of chances, you would say probably the position is that it's not there, or you are not able to indicate in terms of what's possible, what's probable.
I do not 100% know it is there or it is not there. So
Yes. But in terms of your work, chances are that if it was there, you would have seen it, or you are not able to go that far.
I will not necessarily see it. It will be something that will be submitted to the fuel sourcing department because they are contracting these new agreements and transition things.
Yes. But if you wanted to know whether it's there, you would have a way of finding out, wouldn't you?
I could, yes.
Okay, Mr. Maleka, I don't know whether you want to do anything about that.
No,
Or you may have your other ways. You have. Okay, no, that's all right.
I will leave it.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm going to go to that world of speculation. And I'd like
Okay,
to
all
avoid
right.
it. Yes. We have our own views, Chair, but I think in fairness to Mr. Opperman, we will interrogate those views with other witnesses who are supposed to explain these anomalies. Mr. Opperman, I'd like to move then to the next phase of your statement, which is the declaration of business rescue. You start with the topic from paragraph 68 on page 13. Okay? You talk about section 54 notice. We have dealt with section 54 notices during the evidence of Mr. Efron. I'm not going to ask you to repeat it. It's up to you. You may want to give us more information we are not aware of. You then move to the question of the declaration of impossibility by Eskom in page 69 because of strike issues.
Correct.
Yeah. I would like to move away from it unless you think that it's important.
That's fine.
Then you begin with a topic of an interim agreement at the request of workmen's attorneys, who we know at that time they were acting for business rescue practitioners, correct?
That's correct.
Chair, you'll find that letter on page 300. Mr. Opperman, that letter records the extension of the interim agreement. I assume that that's the short-term supply agreement that you said was recommended by Ms. Nteta.
I'm sorry, is that the one on 302? Because I don't have a letter at 300. I've got a divider and then annexure JG026 and then a letter at 302.
Chair, do you not have JG025, which is on page 300?
I'm sorry. I do have, thank you.
Yes. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
So it's a request by the lawyers of the business rescue practitioners to extend further that short-term agreement.
That's correct.
Yes. And just as a matter of clarity, it is the same agreement that was recommended by Ms. Mteta.
Correct.
Yes. Then you refer to JG 26. Chair, you will find it from page 301.
Yes, I think that's the one.
Yes. And that is noticed by the business rescue practitioners to the creditors, shareholders, and all other interested parties of Optimum to tell them that they are now out of business rescue. Are you there at page 302?
I am.
Yes. So that seems to me that that's the end of the commercially limping status of Optimum as a company in financial distress.
By the look of it, yes.
Yes. So it can trade on its own financial muscle. Now, what I want to ask you is this, and we will hear this with the business rescue practitioners when they come in on Tuesday, Chair. Do you know whether or not they had filed a business rescue plan?
I would not know. The business rescue plan would have been shared with Cliff Decker and Hofmeyer at that moment in time, but I would not know.
You yourself would not know?
No.
Fair enough. They sent the same letter to other people, of course. And one of them is Mr. Petros Mazibuko, who was your superior, as I recall.
That is correct.
You reported to him.
That's correct.
Chair, you'll find that letter on page 308.
Thank you.
And in it, well, in fact, I made a mistake. I thought that it was sent by the business rescue practitioners. Far from it. That letter was sent by the new chief operating officer of Optimum after it was taken out of business rescue.
Correct.
It is Mr. van der Merwe.
That's correct.
Chair, you'll find his name on page 310.
Yes.
So this is a company under new management. It sends a letter to Mr. Masibuku confirming that it is out of business rescue. But of importance is what Mr. van der Merwe says in the paragraph just before the escalation metrics. Do you see it, Mr. Opperman?
I do see the paragraph.
He says in it, as proposed last time we met, we would like to propose the following modification to the pricing mechanism. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then he starts explaining the pricing mechanism that he proposes, which is effectively an escalation to the rent per ton of the price that Optimum was providing coal to Eskom, correct?
That's correct.
Yes. Chair, you'll find the explanation of the metrics relating to the escalation on page 309.
Yes, I've got it.
Mr. Opperman, when you look at the table of the escalation, Glencoe, when it owned this mine, it made and requested Eskom to agree to this matrix of a price escalation. Are you aware of that fact?
Yes.
And Eskom rejected that request.
I think it was rejected, Chair, as part of the fourth addendum that was drafted at that moment in time. So yes, the answer is it was rejected
Yes.
because that was terminated.
Yes. Chair, can I ask you to cross-reference the pricing mechanism requested by Mr. van der Merwe on behalf of Tegeta to the request made by Glencoe through Mr. Efron via the fourth addendum at page 148 of Mr. Efron's statement.
108.
148.
Yes, I've got it.
I'm sure you don't have it, but you're aware of it. It is the same cost component of running an operation. It is labor, it is diesel, it is electricity, other materials including engineering and electrical materials. Those are the normal cost items to run a mine, and Glencoe requested the same adjustments in terms of price escalation, and you do confirm that they were rejected.
Correct, yes.
Yes. What happened to this request by Mr. van der Merwe? Did Eskom approve it?
It was eventually approved as part of the fifth addendum, yes.
Yes.
I think in January 2018.
Yes. In fact, it was earlier than that. If you go to page 312, you will see that Mr. Mazibuku responds to that letter of Mr. van der Merwe.
Correct.
And he tells him that as far as he's concerned, he agrees to it, but he will refer to the board for approval. And then the approval comes via the fifth addendum, correct?
That's correct.
I do recall that I saw the fifth addendum in your documentation. Chair, you will find the fifth addendum on page 327.
Yes.
And Mr. Opperman, I'd like to take you to page 330. You'll see that there's a rebasing of the price to 201 rand 46 cents per ton. That's a revised price structure.
That is correct. In order to apply this price-adjusted mechanism, this escalation mechanism, it needs to refer to a base price, and at this moment in time, the base price on this contract still moved back to the price that was in the second addendum, which was 115 rand, 115. So in order for that price to be current, an assessment was done and it was calculated that that is the most representative price of what the coal price would have been at that moment in time, not escalated and then being escalated going forward based on this matrix.
Yes.
So it is a new price, but it was really setting a base price.
Yes. All right. Thank you for that clarity. We now know that there is a fifth addendum that regulates the new price arrangements. I am now at page 14, paragraph 72 of your statement. This is a memorandum sent to the executives of Eskom Can you give us some background to this memorandum? It is on page 314, Chair, going forward.
What page?
314.
Thank you.
Can you give us some background why this memorandum was sent to the senior executives of Eskom?
So, Mr. Chair, at this moment in time, I'm taking you to page 315, paragraph number 7. What was of significance is that the Indrina stock days by this time has significantly reduced and were down at 25.2 days. We were sitting in October. It is just before the rainy season. The December festive break is on its way, when we traditionally have a road embargo period where we don't haul coal on the road. And we were concerned that the stock days will drop below 20 days. 20 days is of significance in terms of grid code compliance within generation, where power station stock days need to be maintained at. And the intent of this document was to seek approval to increase deliveries via road to Indrina Power Station. At this moment in time, it was evident that Optimum could not sustain or could not meet the burn requirement of the power station, and we realized that we needed to get some additional coal in. At this moment in time of drafting this note, Eskom were in financial constraints, and because of this significant cost impact, as the coal operations team, we felt that it is necessary to seek approval for this additional expenditure. And the typical cost implication is listed under point number 8, where the typical cost for the coal that was then contracted to Indrina on the road is noted against the cost of coal at that moment in time from Optimum via conveyor. Bullet point number 9 then reflects the additional coal cost, and then the recommendation on the next page then seeks the support in order to bring in additional coal to Indrina Power Station to recover the stock days back to around 30 days.
Right, Mr. Opperman, all you're saying in short is that you were going to request an approval to buy coal from elsewhere than from Optimum Coal Mine.
Yeah, the Lycus contract, the Lycus KK Pit 5 contract that is mentioned here is a contract that what at that moment was contracted for Indrina. So historically they did deliver coal to Indrina, but just in lower volumes because the makeup volumes were low. And at this moment in time, we had to significantly increase, which were not budgeted for.
No, I understand, but you were going to buy from a third-party supplier.
Correct, yes. But it was an already existing contract.
I see.
Correct.
And you're going to incur substantial additional costs.
That is correct, Chair.
Yes. And the cost component, which is an additional cost for Eskom, was in the order of 494 rand per ton.
No, Mr. Maleka, the additional cost is under point number 9, and it is around 312 rand per ton.
Oh. Just explain to me, how do you get to that figure?
So under point number 8, it is explained what the likest cost component is at that moment in time. 494.99 per ton, that was delivered cost.
Yes.
So that is coal and transportation included. And then the coal cost from Optimum Indrina at that moment in time was 182.89.
So you minus
the variance is the additional cost, correct. Yes.
So the additional cost is the variance,
Correct.
which is 312 rand.
Correct.
Okay. Now, can I ask you this? Was that approval given to your recollection?
Yes, it was given. On the next page, page 316, the document was signed. And it was signed by Mr. Edwin Mobelan on behalf of Marcelo Coco as Group Executive Generation. So most probably at that time he was acting in that position. He, however, do limit the volume.
Yes.
And there is this handwritten comment where he says that he does approve to only import 100 kilotons, and he also gives a date by when it can be done.
Can you read that handwritten manuscript for us? I can't make head or tail of it. If you could, that would be great.
I will try my best.
Yes.
So Mr. Mabelani makes an asterisk with a footnote where he said approved to import 100 kiloton, that's 100,000 tons, till 15/11/26. So that's 15 November 2016, to afford okay, I can't cipher that, but it's to afford, and it looks like the station opportunity to either recover full supply from the mine or increase reclaim capacity by deploying additional plant.
All right.
So if I read it, his approval is granted for 100 kilotons at a certain date, and then the station need to perform on two aspects, which is either to recover the supply from the mine, so meaning that there is something that gets corrected there, or alternatively to get additional reclaiming infrastructure to move the coal from the coal reserves that they have.
So at that point in time, we're sitting with a position where there is an existing CSA, in
Correct.
terms of which Optimum Coal is obliged to supply certain maximum tonnage to Hendrina, correct?
That's correct.
And your request for a purchase of a shortfall to cover the December holiday problem. Had you, at that point in time, made an analysis that what was supplied to Hendrina at that point in time were tonnages that were consistent with the contractual volume that the mine had to supply? What I want to understand is the shortage in the stockpile at that point in time. Was it because Optimum did not comply with its obligation to provide the tonnages under the contract? What was the reason for the short?
The reason for the shortfall was the fact that Optimum just came out of business rescue, and during the business rescue period, Optimum basically delivered whatever they could deliver. So even though the contract was 458.3 kilotons per month, If one goes back, the actual deliveries were more often than not ranging between 300 and 400. So over a period of time while Optimum were in business rescue, the stock level slowly depleted. And at this moment in time, the significance of the risk was the upcoming rainy season as well as the December festive break.
No, I understand. So the short supply is attributable to business rescue situation of Optimum?
Mainly, yes.
Okay. Thank you for that. Then you go to the next topic about the suspension of penalties and a second business rescue situation. You deal with the topic from paragraph 73. And I'd like to take you to Annexure GJ30. Chair, you'll find Annexure GJ30 on page 317.
Thank you.
And you will see that again, it's a letter addressed to Mr. Mazibuku, from Mr. George van der Merwe. So it is Optimum Coal under new management speaking to Eskom. I'm going to read the second unnumbered paragraph on page 318 and ask you for your comments. It reads as follows, Mr. Opperman. As we are all well aware that the current agreement is an onerous agreement. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
What is new about this? Glencore had already told Eskom about the onerous nature of this agreement.
That's correct, yes.
So what has suddenly changed? This is an old historic problem the mine had. Nothing is new.
I think the only thing that was new at this moment is the new management at the mine, but that's it.
Indeed. And that's the point. That Eskom is now willing to entertain old problems because they are raised by a new manager or new owner. Anyway, let's read on. Due to this, Glencore went into business rescue by August 2015. That we know. The factor surrounding the hardship clause in the agreement has not changed. That we know. Since the signing of the cooperation agreement, inflation has increased 2 consecutive years by more than 6%, even though the mine inflation is well documented to be more in the region of 10 to 12% per year. This shows that the hardship has increased significantly. Let me read it again, Chair.
Mr. Opperman will have to come to our rescue. Did you see that, Mr. Opperman?
Yes, I did.
It looks like Eskom is threatening to let us stop, make us stop.
Mr. Chair, unfortunately, I can't be in 2 places at once.
Chair, we still have some time. I think we should continue.
Yes, no, we should continue.
Stop and go would be the order of the day if
Yeah.
Eskom does not help us.
No, we must continue.
Yes. Mr. Opperman, I was reading the last sentence. This shows that the hardship has increased significantly since then. All right. Can I stop there and ask you the following questions? We heard from the evidence of Mr. Clinton Efron that before Glencore accepted the final offer that was made by Together to acquire this mine, it did a due diligence. You are aware of that fact?
Yes.
So anyone who does a DD about an asset to be acquired would know about these problems.
That's correct, Chair.
So this is nothing new. You agree with it?
That is correct, yes.
But what is important, and I'd like you to ask us, even if you go back to your records, we now know that when Tegeta bought this mine, the hardship arbitration was still there. It had not been concluded.
That is correct.
Yes. So what they raise here is the progression of hardship in the middle of an existing or subsisting arbitration
That's
on
correct.
the very same issue of hardship, correct?
That's correct.
Yes. Optimum is threatening, and let me interrupt myself. Optimum under a new management is threatening the second round of business rescue based on the same set and circumstances that gave rise to the first round of business rescue. Correct?
That is correct, yes.
Yes. What was the response of Mr. Mazibuko to this letter of Mr. van der Merwe?
Chair, I don't recall the response to that letter specifically, and I can go and check on the records if there's something. But I think the next annex, Chair, refers to a memo that Mr. Mazibuko then sent to the Chief Procurement Officer on this same matter.
And that memo begins at page 321. Correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
You will see, Chair, that it has been signed by Mr. Mazibuko on page 324.
It was compiled and signed by him, and two others also signed.
And it was approved, amongst others, by Mr. Edwin Mabelane and Mr. Koko.
Chair, that signature is not Mr. Koko's signature, that was Mr. Willie Majola's signature.
Yes, but he signs on his behalf. Yes.
Correct.
Yes. The bottom line is that that memorandum by Mr. Mazibuko was signed.
That's correct, it's
Yes.
supported.
Now, I'd like to get your assistance on aspects of this document. The subject matter is optimum request for cooperation agreement. You see that?
I do, sir.
More or less what Lenco did during its days when it requested for a cooperation agreement in order to look into and resolve the hardship clause claims and arbitration, correct?
That is correct.
Yes. Paragraph 1 says, this memorandum aims to provide a summary on the proposals that Optimum shared with ESCOM to consider in order to keep Optimum from evoking hardship provision in the contract. I'm sure the verb there was intended to be from invoking the hardship clause, correct?
That is correct.
Yes. The background is given in paragraph 2, paragraph 3, and the financial implication of the proposal is set out in paragraph 7 on page 322. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
Yes. And there, Mr. Mazibuko says to his seniors, currently the shortfall coal is delivered at approximately 500 ton, versus the approximate 210 currently paid to Optimum. I suppose this is the shortfall that you have talked about from a third-party supplier.
That is correct. So at this moment in time, the additional coal that was delivered via road to make up for the balance is referred to here as 500 rand a ton delivered cost.
Yes. There are recommendations which are made from paragraph 9.1, and I'm just going to ask you to go to paragraph 10. Can I ask you to read it out for us, please?
Should Eskom decide to implement the existing agreement, Eskom would have to change Optimum shortfall to supply penalties in the region of 585 million rand. It is Eskom's view that this will probably cripple the company and put it into liquidation. The next best alternative option for Eskom would exceed the cost of Hendrina coal supply. It therefore makes business sense to keep Optimum afloat and supplying Eskom at the current terms and conditions of the contract, even if the supply is reduced.
What does that mean, Mr. Opperman?
Mr. Chair, I can't really understand the first sentence that talks about the short supply, and it talks about short supply penalties of the region of 585 million. But I think the paragraph continues to say that these penalties need to be waived. I think it's implied.
I'm sorry, Mr. Opperman. Let's go back to the first sentence and see if there is a problem understanding it. Forget about the fact that there are two verbs that follow each other in the consider and decide. Probably one should read it like this. Should Eskom decide to implement the existing agreement, Eskom would have to charge Optimum shortfall coal supply penalties in the region of 585 million rand. Does that assist at all?
That does help. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
So what my deduction is at this moment in time is that if the existing agreement just carries on, there is a penalty that is due for short supply in the region of 585 million. It then carries on to say that it is Eskom's view that if this penalty is applied, that it will cripple the company, put it in liquidation, and that will imply that Hendrina will not get coal supply from Optimum, and that will have an even worse effect, if I can say it like that.
Indeed. In fact, if you go to paragraph 9.3 on the same page, you will see that the recommendation by Mr. Mazibuko is that Eskom should reserve its rights on all penalties and not deduct the same.
Correct.
Correct? In other words, you say, look, I know there are penalties that are accumulating, but I'm not going to impose them.
Correct.
And the idea is if you impose them, then there is liquidation coming.
That is correct. And I think it is in line, Chair, with the request that was originally made that detailed point number 5.3 of the cooperation agreement, the then cooperation agreement with Glencore that refers to the suspension of penalties.
Yes, correct. But the difference is this. There, Eskom said, I will suspend the penalties pending the outcome of the negotiations.
Correct.
When negotiations failed, Eskom imposed those penalties.
That's correct.
The difference here is that Eskom, at least from Mr. Mazibuko's recommendation, as accepted amongst others by Mr. Mabelane, is that you're going to give a favorable treatment to Tegeta under new management.
I see you nod.
If I read this, point number 9.3, it does say that Eskom to reserve its rights on penalties. So yes, correctly.
Yes,
It means that the penalties will not be levied.
indeed. That's a favorable treatment of the same, arising from the same mine, from the same condition, simply because there's a new owner.
That's correct.
Yes. Can I take you to the next document, which is the temporary relief agreement? You talk about it from paragraph 75 on page 14. Chair, as I have it, that document will be from page 3 to 5.
Okay, I've got it at 3 to 6.
You see, in that document, Mr. Mabelane records the extent of the relief measures extended to Optimum Coal under new management. And they are set out from paragraphs 1 to 3 on page 3 to 6. Do you see that?
I do see it, yes.
The penalties are not deducted. The monthly supply is reduced to 375 tons. Do you see that?
I do.
And you know that under the CSA, if you short supply, you incur the short supply penalties.
Correct.
So another form of penalty which is now almost abandoned.
Correct.
Yes. And the number one measure that I have skipped related to the inflation metrics, which has now been escalated. The point of clarity there is it the same escalation metrics that we have previously looked at?
Yes,
Or
Mr.
is this
Chairman,
a
it's
new
the
one?
same.
It's the same one?
It's the same.
Okay, all right. Were you consulted about these measures before they were formally communicated to the new management of Optimum?
I do recall being engaged by Mr. Mazibuko around the coal burn requirements for Indrina Power Station at that moment in time. So yes, I was involved in that.
Yes. Mr. Upperman, I know that from paragraph 78 on page 14, you deal with a number of developments. For my part, I'm not going to deal with them because you've already dealt with the history of the fifth addendum as you reflect on it in paragraph 78, page 15. With your permission and that of the chair, I'd like to jump to the next event from paragraph 79 of your statement. And there you deal with the second round of business rescue by Optimum, which was initiated on the 19th of February 2018, correct?
Correct.
You refer to the relevant CIPIC documents from page 345. Chair, you'll see the documentation that is required by the Commissioner of Intellectual Property from page 345. And again, this is a voluntary.
Yes, I've got it.
It's a voluntary business rescue proceedings initiated by the directors of Optimum Coal, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
By their resolution. You will see the resolution appear on page 346. And the explanatory sworn statement, Chair, begins at page 348.
What begins at 348?
The explanatory grounds for the resolution to initiate voluntary business rescue.
Oh, okay.
And the contention of financial distress is explained from page 350. Mr. Opperman, I'm sure you have looked at the grounds for initiating business rescue proceedings as set out in this explanatory sworn statement.
Have you gotten Mr. Opperman?
Are you there?
I am here, yes.
I have looked at this, and the grounds for initiating business rescue proceedings are unrelated to the hardship that was brought to your attention by Optimum Coal. In fact, they relate to the fact that several banking institutions had closed the accounts of Tegeta.
That is correct.
Do you know whether Optimum Coal Mine had its own account, separate from the accounts of Tegeta, Oak Bay, and other associated companies?
Mr. Chair, I know that the banking details had to be changed on the transition of the sale between Glencore and Tegeta, and that went into a Bank of Baroda account initially, and then I think at some stage it changed to a Netbank account. So my interpretation from that was that it is not an Optimum account, it was a Tegeta account.
It was a Tegeta account?
Yes, yeah.
All right. So for that reason, this company went into business rescue, and new business rescue practitioners were appointed.
That's correct.
Yes. Do you know them? Have you dealt with them before?
I have met them and I have dealt with them a couple of times.
All right. I am now going to go to the new topic, but before I go there, I'd like to put some concluding proposition to you and ask for your reaction, if the chair would permit me.
You are permitted, Mr. Malik.
Mr. Oberman, it is quite clear from what we have discussed. It is quite clear from the change of ownership that one set of owners were treated fundamentally different to another set of owners by Eskom. Do you agree?
I agree.
Yes. You also agree that because of that difference of treatment, the one set of owners, which is Glencore, was forced to take the radical decision of declaring a hardship, which led to an arbitration. Do you also agree that as a result of that difference in treatment, Glencore had to put Optimum Coal Mine into a business rescue?
I agree, Chair.
Yes. And do you also agree that in regard to the new owner, Eskom extended favorable treatment, totally different to that of Glencore? In that context, I'd like you to comment on the following. One, do you agree that Eskom accommodated the financial and operating difficulties that Optimum experienced after Tegeta took over?
Definitely, yes.
All of these difficulties which related to Optimum coal mine were clearly foreseeable when Tegeta took over that mine. They were not new. In fact, they were a continuation of the old problem.
That's correct.
Yes. Chair, I'd like to go to the next topic, which is Arnott,
Yes.
and I hope to be quick because they provide a useful context to the prepayment, the 659 million rand prepayment that Mr. Naga talked about in detail on Tuesday.
Yes.
You begin with the topic from paragraph 80. And in paragraph 81, you record that the primary supplier of coal to Arnott was Exxaro, correct?
That is correct.
Yes. And it did so in terms of a long-term coal supply agreement, which was a cost-plus type of agreement.
That's correct, Chair.
Yes. Do you know where then when the agreement between Eskom and Exxaro came to an end?
Chair, I'm not 100% sure, but it was in December 2015. I'm not sure of the exact date.
Yes. It seems to me that it was because of the termination of that Exxaro agreement that Eskom decided to go into short-term supply agreement with Tegeta. And you begin to explore the first agreement from paragraph 82 on page 16. That short supply agreement came into being from the 16th of January 2016, correct? Chair, you'll find it on page 353.
Chair, I have it that it came into existence on the 13th of January, and that's as per paragraph number 2 on page 354.
Yes.
Yes, I found it. Mr. Opperman, you were making some point while I was looking for page 35.
Chair, Mr. Maleka indicated that it commenced on 16 January, and I just clarified to say that based on point number 2, it seems that it commenced on the 13th of January.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. All right. The coal which Tegeta was going to supply to Arnott comes from Optimum Coal Mine, correct?
That is correct, Chair.
I don't know the coal specifications of Arnott, but did that coal meet the specifications of Arnott?
Chair, the coal that came from Optimum,
Yes.
yes, he did.
Okay. And it was going to be delivered via transportation?
Yes, via road trucks.
And in paragraph 7.1 on page 356, you will see that the price is expressed in terms of gigajoules as 20 rand 41 cents per gigajoule. Do you see that?
That is correct, yes.
If you use your expertise, what will be the rand per ton conversion of that price?
The conversion from rand per gigajoule to rand per ton, one simply just multiply it by the calorific value. So it will be that value of 24.01 multiplied by 20.41.
What does it give you? You might.
I need to clarify that the calorific value recorded in that quality table at the top
Yes.
is on an air-dried basis. It's not an as-received basis. And normally the price is recorded in as received. So if one just continue reading that paragraph, it will say it's 20 rand 41 cents per gigajoule on an as received basis, excluding VAT. So that 24.01, which is air dried, that figure need to reduce slightly. But I think one is just looking for a ballpark figure. So if we call it 23.95 or something like that times 20.41 will give a rand per ton price.
The mathematics that Ms. Hofmeyer comes down to on that method of calculation suggests that it is 488 rand 58 cents per ton.
That sounds more or less correct, yes.
So, Mr. Maleka, it looks like Ms. Hofmeyer is very good with figures.
Yes. 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 That same coal, if it were to be supplied to Hendrina, it will be far less in terms of price per tonnage, correct?
Yes, Chair, it will be. What need to be noted, however, is that it is a different quality parameter, which does make a difference. And then I just looked in my records that January 2016 actually price was actually 469 rand 50 cents.
400 and?
469.50.
Thank you for that detail. We know that that agreement was extended later on for a further period of 5 months, correct? You will find the extension in Annexure GJ 36. And Chair, you will find GJ 36 on page 361.
I found it.
Chair, can I just clarify something?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think this initial extension was only for 3 months. It was only for February, March, and April, not 5 months.
Oh, it was for 3 months. You mean the extension at GJ 36?
That is correct. If one goes to page 382, it's got the contract coal supply schedule. And in there, one can see that the volumes were planned for February 2016, March and April 2016 for a total volume of 500,000 tons. and 11.5 million gigajoules.
All right. Then there's something wrong about your statement.
I noticed that as well.
Yes. So can we change 5 months in paragraph 83 to 3 months?
Please.
What was the paragraph in the statement again?
Page 16, paragraph 83.
So we cross out 3 and insert 5.
Chair, can I maybe just assist? Paragraph number 83
Yes.
reads that the contract with the Geta was extended for a further 3 months in February. So in February, it was extended for 3 months. It was February, March, April. And then again, it was extended for another 5 months in May, for May, June, July, August.
Or we should simply,
So it reads
Add.
fine. It reads fine.
It reads fine.
so we don't change anything in paragraph 83.
So we don't change anything?
No, we don't need to change.
Oh. Okay.
Okay. All right. Chair, nothing much turns on the terms of the extension. I've looked at them. Again, subject to further guidance from Mr. Opperman. The price is the same. Do you
That is
confirm
correct,
it?
sir.
Yes.
That is correct.
Yes. And then you say something in paragraph 85 on page 16. If I may read it loud. You say, my concern at the time, and as the contract manager responsible for Hendrina Power Station, was that OCM could not supply sufficient coal to Hendrina Power Station as was required, but it supplied coal to Anode Power Station through a contract with Tegeta during the period January 2016 to September 2016. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And you refer to GJ37, which is at page 414.
Yes.
You will see that the term of that further extension, Mr. Opperman, is set out on page 417. Paragraph 8, correct?
That is correct.
So your concern, as far as I understand it, articulated in paragraph 85, is that there were these short-term agreements extended from time to time by
I'm sorry, Mr. Malega. You are referring to paragraph 4 of this agreement, under which there is a reference to clause 8.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So, Chair, the point is, from January 2016 to at least September 2016, there were short-term supply agreements concluded between Tegeta and Eskom to lift coal from Optimum Coal Mine to supply Anode, when at the same time, for that period, Optimum could not supply sufficient coal to
Yes.
Hendrina.
Hendrina.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Mr. Opperman says he had some concerns in that regard.
Yes.
He articulated the concern in paragraph 85. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Opperman, there must be a reason why you are concerned. And I suggest to you that one of the reasons related to the price of coal which Tegeta would fetch by supplying to Anode instead of supplying to Hendrina.
Correct.
So Eskom allows the same supplier who has contractual obligation on a long-term agreement to choose where it will get higher prices for the same coal. Do you agree?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Actually, would it be correct, Mr. Opperman, to say in regard to exactly that point, that Eskom ought not to have allowed Tegeta to supply coal to Anot when it could not supply coal sufficiently to Hendrina?
I think I need to put context to it.
Yes, do.
And I want to make reference just to where Hendrina was at that moment in time.
Yes, yes.
So if we go back to February 2016, the Hendrina stock days were very high. The stock days were around 52 days,
Yes.
which is abnormally high for Hendrina. However, during that period in time, if one look at the burn that the station was burning, and for February itself it was fine, but from March onwards we see that the volumes that Optimum deliver versus what the station is burning, there is a slight shortfall, which in principle is not a big problem if you have high inventory levels, which we had at this moment in time. But what I've seen is that we started at 52 days in January. At the end of this period in September, when these short-term agreements ended to Arnott, the Hendrina stock days ended at 29 days. So it was very clear that the coal that was supposed to go to Hendrina did not go to Hendrina because we had to use our inventory. So the 29 days is still not that of a big concern. It is manageable. But what I wanted to try and bring across with this statement was to say that during this period when Optimum was supplying coal to Arnott, it was clear that the coal supply to Hendrina power station reduced.
Yes.
Just repeat that last statement.
It
was clear?
It was clear that the coal supply to Hendrina power station reduced.
Yes.
So they did not meet the burn requirement on a month-to-month basis from January to September 2016. It wasn't a huge risk because we had high inventory levels, but I just wanted to bring that across, that the Arnott deliveries were made at the cost of coal supply going to Hendrina. I think the more important is what Mr. Maleka has touched on was the one end you sitting with a cost with rand per ton around 470 rand, pardon me, versus a price on the other end which were around 200 rand. So that is a huge difference. So one could argue, why not take the additional coal under the Hendrina agreement at the Hendrina price?
Indeed. And my understanding of your CSA with Optimum allowed you to take even stock more than the minimum or the maximum.
It did, yes.
You had the option to overbuy. And that option, if you exercised it, would have helped Eskom to reduce the costs of buying directly from Tegeta to supply to Arnott.
It could have been possible,
Yes.
Chair. However, what is important to note is that the coal that went to Arnott was of a higher grade than the coal that went to Hendrina power station. So just buying the Hendrina spec coal at 200 rand a ton will most probably not would have been accepted by Arnott as a delivery, because the coal that went from Optimum Colliery to Arnott was the portion of the coal that they actually allocated to their export business. So they were making that export coal available to actually take that to Arnott.
No, let's not go there. Please, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We had undisputed evidence of Mr. Efron about when they closed the export market. You are aware of the date?
Yes,
Yes. So there was no export market for Hendrina at that point in time?
correct.
Yes. In fact, what was existing is that at that point in time when this supply, directly by Tegeta from Optimum Coal Mine to Arnott, you had relaxed the sizing specifications for the benefit of Tegeta, correct?
At Hendrina.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. So the same coal with a relaxed specification going to a different mine at a higher price.
Well, before you answer, Mr. Opperman, you were saying something, and Mr. Malega said, let's not go there. Now, some evidence had been had by this commission from other witnesses he mentioned. That's not intended to suppress your evidence in case you have knowledge of something that might be in conflict with what another witness has said. So if it's something that you have personal knowledge on and you are able to say it, even if another witness has said something else, you can say it. So it just depends. I just don't want you to have any perception that maybe you are not allowed to say something just because another witness said something else. He didn't intend to say that.
Thank you, Chair.
So you can go back to his question. Mr. Malek, I think you did put a question.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm looking at the statement of Mr. Efron. And Chair, for your notes, you can record that it is at page 5, paragraph 22.
Thank you.
And he elaborated on this
Yes.
when he explained how they closed the open cast mine because of the decline in the spot price of coal in the export market.
Yes. No, that's fine. I
And
just
again,
wanted to make sure.
Mr. Opperman, that is not new information to you, because you have referenced that report by, what is the name of that consulting company again? Meridian.
Meridian.
Yes. They talk about the export market, the decline, and when Glencore stopped exporting. In regard to at least this mine, Optimum Coal Mine, the undisputed evidence, you can dispute it if you want to, but as far as we know, the owners of the mine have told the chairperson that they closed the export market around 2012. Is your information different?
Chair, I would rather reserve my comment on that. Since the owner of the mine made a comment on it, I will just be talking around my understanding on their processing plant and how it works, which in my view afforded an opportunity to get a higher grade coal spec out of that same plant, the plant that was currently in operation. But let me rather not talk about it. Let the specialists talk about it around their own mine.
Okay.
There's a last topic that I'd like to explore with you, and it begins at page 86. Sorry, paragraph 86 on page 16. You say in that paragraph, during my interview with the Hawks, I was shown a Primary Energy Division supplier payment control form issued to Tegeta for prepayment in the amount of 578.5 million rand for Arnott and supported by invoices. You mentioned them there. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
It seems to me that you acquire knowledge of these things for the first time when the Hawks show you these documents. Is that a fair reading of your statement?
Chair, that is not so. I do not keep records of these payment control sheets, just in my line of work. These control sheets, I do sign them. It was not the first time that I see it, but I do not keep record of them.
No, I understand. So when did you get to know that there was this prepayment made by Eskom to Tegeta?
I got to know about it on the 3rd of May, Chair,
3rd of May, which year?
2016.
2016.
Yes.
Okay. We know that the prepayment was made around the 13th of April, 2016, correct?
Chair, I think it was made on the 18th of April.
Of April.
Yes.
Let's work with the date that you have.
I'm just reading from the payment sheet, so I'm just reading the date that's on it. So.
The Chair, we will for now just work with the date
Yeah,
of
okay.
Mr. Opperman. Our date is
Yes.
totally different
Oh,
for
okay.
obvious reasons.
Okay.
But let's work with the 18th of April. So you become aware of that prepayment a month after it had been made.
That's correct, Chair.
Yes. And again, the basis of that prepayment was a prepayment agreement concluded between Eskom and Tegeta for the supply of coal to Arnott, which Tegeta gets from Optimum Coal Mine.
That's correct, Chair.
Yes. So effectively, this was an extension of the previous short-term agreement we have talked about.
That's correct, Chair.
Yes. Were you aware of the prepayment agreement that sought to establish the legal basis for this prepayment?
Not at all, Chair.
When did you become aware for the first time of that prepayment agreement?
I first became aware of it, Chair, on the 5th of May when I was handed the payment sheet for signature, for my signature, and in my view, payment processing. And on that date, I requested supporting documentation. Initially, when the management accountant brought me the payment pack, immediately went to Mr. Mazibuko, and I said to him that I don't carry any knowledge of this. How do we need to deal with it? We had a look at it and we agreed that we need supporting documentation. The supporting documentation was provided, after which we signed it off. And basically my signing on that control sheet was basically, as Mr. Nagar has indicated, to move the funds from the then purchase order that was used under the Brakfontein contract to the purchase order under the Optimum or the Tegeta Arnott contract.
Chair, the same problems that you raised with Mr. Naga, I think they are now unraveling
Yes.
from a different perspective. But the simple point is this, that someone again usurp your functions and duties to go and execute a prepayment agreement without even talking to you.
That's correct, sir.
Is there any reason why, any reason that you can favor to the chairperson, why someone would take over your functions and duties without talking to you on such a fundamental matter relating to prepayment, advance payment for coal stock which you have not yet received?
Mr. Maleka, Chair, I can't provide an answer for it. I will just speculate.
But is it not a matter of concern to you?
It is a matter of concern.
Did you ask Mr. Naga, did you ask Mr. Mazibuko when they come to you a month later in May and say, please authorize payment? Did you ask them, but why are you taking over my line function and duty?
Chair, I did not ask them that. what I did ask them is, at the time when I had to sign the transfer of these funds between two different accounts, I was extremely reluctant to sign this document, and that's why I immediately went to Mr. Mazibuko and said to him that we need to get supporting documents. It was at that point in time that the minutes of the board decision was provided, and I think the position just is that if the board made the decision, then surely I can't stand in their way. At least by that time, we also realized that the payment were done. The accountant told me that the payment was done.
So you are formulating paperwork to cover your tracks after the fact of payment?
Not covering my tracks,
No.
with respect.
Well, explain it to me. Why are you doing things after the fact?
The reason why I signed this document was because the monies had to be transferred out of the Brakfontein account into the Optimum account, and that is the reason why this was signed.
And that's the point, Mr. Opperman, that you use a totally different contract number to rectify at best for you a prepayment for a totally different contract.
So with all respect, Chair, I never used that different contract number to process the payment. The payment was processed by somebody else without my knowledge against a order number that I created, that I need to admit, because the order numbers gets created quarterly.
Yes.
So I did create that order number, but I never used the wrong order number to process a payment.
No. I'm asking you this because you are the best person to help us now. At that point in time, when you begin the paperwork, the payment had been made on your version.
That's correct,
Yes.
Chair.
The paperwork repeats the mistake which Mr. Naga has told us about. You use the Brakfontein contract in order to do the paperwork.
No, that is wrong.
Okay, explain that.
At this moment in time when I did this transaction, there was no order number for this activity. There was a payment made under the Brakfontein contract, so that the incorrect account was used to
Yes.
make that prepayment.
Yes.
So at this moment in time when this document came to me and I had to transfer the funds under the correct contract, I had to go into our accounting system, into our SAP system, and create a purchase order in order for this to take effect. And that is also the document that's attached. That's one of my annexures.
I understand. And so I go back to my question. Payment had been done under a wrong contract number.
Correct.
You now do the paperwork to rectify the situation.
Yes.
And that is after the fact.
Yes.
Chair, I think I have explored all the questions that I wanted to put to Mr. Opperman. Mr. Opperman, the rest are things that talk about a new CSA. I'm not going to raise those issues with you unless you want to talk to them. These are the matters that begin at page 88, paragraph 88 on page 17, up to the end of your statement.
Yeah, I'm fine.
He's asking whether you have anything that you want to say in regard to those paragraphs, because from his side, he doesn't think he wants to ask you any questions about what you say in those paragraphs.
Chair, I'm fine. Thank you very much for the
Are you fine?
opportunity.
Last question, Mr. Opperman. What is the lesson that you yourself have learned from all of this that you can share with us so that the chairperson has the comfort of your evidence when he considers making recommendations? You can think carefully on that question, and if you decide to answer it, please answer it on a considered basis via a supplementary affidavit.
Okay.
You said, Mr. Opperman, when you were required to sign in regard to this payment, this prepayment, you were reluctant. Why were you reluctant? What made you reluctant?
Chair, I was initially only handed a front page with an invoice and had to sign that. When I sign invoices, it always have supporting documentation. The fact that this was a prepayment amount obviously made it different, so you will not have quality sheets and payment calculation sheets and maybe supporting documentations out of the contract. And so, but for me, signing off this significant big amount on 2 documents made me very reluctant. And it was at that point then that the board minutes were presented and all those approving and supporting documents. And once that was attached and Mr. Mazibuko and myself read through it, we decided that we will sign it.
In terms of what was before you at that time, was there any reference to this payment being a prepayment? In other words, the documentation that you had in front of you at that time, did it reflect that this was a prepayment?
Mr. Chair, no, it did not reflect that it was a prepayment. If one look at the invoice, it's a normal invoice with volumes on it. But me being responsible for this contract, I knew that there was no such payment like this due. So
yes.
I knew this,
Yes.
that this payment is out of the ordinary. That I did know.
Yes. Is that part of what made you reluctant or
Correct.
not really?
Correct.
Yes. So you knew that there were no services or there was no coal that had been provided for which this was payment.
That is correct.
Yes, and that worried you.
Correct.
And the documentation that was given to you after you asked for more documentation, what documentation was it again?
Mr. Chair, it's the documentation that's currently attached to this document. So it was extract of the shareholders and Tegeta exploration meeting that was held where the decision was made for this prepayment and how the coal will be supplied to recover it, as well as the minutes or the extract from the minutes that was from the board teleconference that was held on the 11th of April. Approving this prepayment.
And up to that point, or rather, was it, or how often did you at ESCOM within your portfolio, did you have to deal with prepayments? How regular was that? Regular is as in the sense of how often would it happen that you come across a situation where prepayment had to be made?
Chair, in my 9.5 years in this capacity, this was the first time.
This was the first time?
Yes.
And after that, has there been another one?
No.
Yeah. And obviously, you were concerned that there was something irregular or about this, or not really?
The moment that
because there were no services that had been granted, that had been given to ESCOM, and there was no coal grant given to ESCOM for which this was payment, and this is something that had never happened in your entire time when you were working at ESCOM. That should have worried you, as this is something that's probably not regular, not correct.
Definitely, it is not regular, and it did worry me.
Yes.
As I say, that I sign multiple payments like this on a monthly basis. This was the first time that I had it, and it really did make me feel very uncomfortable. That's why I immediately went and engaged my senior on it and consulted with him. So, yeah.
When you were provided with further documentation, that further documentation did not remove the fact that no goods or services had been provided to ESCOM for which this was payment, isn't it?
That's correct.
That,
yes.
that remained to be that
Yes.
remained the position.
That's correct, yes.
Still, it was a first time after many years that you were working at ESCOM that you were being asked to do this.
That's correct, yes.
Were you concerned in any way that you might, by signing, you might be allowing yourself to be party to something irregular?
Mr. Chair, when I read the agreement that was attached to the payment pack, I could see that Eskom will get the value for that prepayment. It was obviously something that I would have to manage because it now meant that there was a payment made up front and we will now get the coal delivered, and I sort of will work on a rebate account the whole time until the whole money has been recovered. So it was definitely doing things back to front. But when I read the agreement, I felt comfortable that we will get the value for what was paid. Yes, it is putting trust in people delivering, and maybe one could question that, but yeah, that's it.
But if if you were party to a transaction in terms of which a supplier was to be given a prepayment of this size and something happened and then ESCOM didn't get any value, then there would be a problem, isn't it?
Yes, I think there would have been, yes.
There would be a problem. And as a manager, it would be part of your duties to look after the interests of ESCOM in that kind of situation, to say you don't want ESCOM to be put at a greater risk for that kind of situation, isn't it?
For sure.
Yes. But did you raise with the person senior to you that you talked about to say, but why should I sign this thing because there seems to be something irregular here and so on? Did you put your concern at that level?
I did. I definitely did it. I did it at the moment that I got the payment back for
Yes.
approval. Normally, I will just sit at my desk. I will work through the normal documentation, sign it. It will go to my senior and he will sign it.
Yes.
And this day when it happened, I immediately took the whole pack and I went to his office and I immediately discussed it with him.
And what did he say about this concern?
I cannot recall what
You
he
can't
said.
recall. Okay. And what was his name again?
Mr. Petrus Mazibuko.
Sorry? Masibuko.
Mazibuko, yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. Chair, it's almost past. Mr. Opperman is not done yet.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Ms. Hofmeyer will deal with the rest of his evidence relating to Bloemfontein on Monday.
On Monday.
Yes.
Okay.
We propose to start at 9:30 again.
I think except on Wednesday when we will start at 9, every day next week we'll start at 9:30.
Yes.
And we will finish at 4:30.
Yes.
Going forward, we might increase that time to starting at 9 and finishing at 5.
Yes.
Because there is still a lot of work to be done.
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
Yes.
So Mr. Opperman will come back on Monday.
Mr. Opperman, you are aware that you have to finish the Bloemfontein leg of your testimony,
That's correct, Chair.
and it's on Monday.
Yes.
That is
Yes.
fine.
Yes.
Okay, on Monday we'll start at 9:30.
100%.
Yes, okay. Okay, so we are going to adjourn for today and we'll resume on Monday at 9:30.
Thank
We
you, Chair.
adjourn.
Thank you.